with my blackboard. I bought the red board, but it was too easy. They say this is 4 inches, 4-inch equivalent break. It's not, but it's 2 inches. Ready? Set. Go. You gotta back up. You gotta lean this way.
I did lean into that.
Okay. There you go. You should like this.
Alright.
I think it'll work.
Oh, well,
Okay, you got it?
no.
Alright. Oh! I don't.
Well, we got.
So this week I want to give you a little bit of a primer with respect to marriage counseling, because we've been talking a lot about Gottman, and I want to continue talking about Gottman, but I want to place it into context. Marriage counseling sucks. In a word, it sucks. It is right about the level that people are when we first started this track down medical lane and actually observe and do what works and what doesn't work. By the way, that only started about the 1890s, when we began systematically looking at what works and what doesn't work, and then doing what works and doing less of what doesn't work. Before that, they had a system called trephining. And trephining is where you would take a patient who was having headaches or whatever problems they may have. It was thought that this was caused by evil spirits. So how do you fix it? It's actually very simple. How do you fix it? You drill a hole in the skull and you let out the evil spirits. And then if they're still sick, you take leeches and you put them all over their body and you suck out the blood. So you take a weak patient, you make them weaker, you drill holes in their skull, and then you suck out their blood. And you restore the balance and restore the humors. That's about where we are with marriage counseling today. It's not much more advanced than that. They use the same defenses that the trephining people used, right? They say, well, the marriage would have died anyway. They spend months weakening the man, destroying the marriage, and then they get divorced and they say, oh, well, hell, he would have died anyway. You know, the patient would have died if we hadn't drilled the holes in his skull, so it's not our fault. That's the approach most marriage counselors take. It's outrageous, and there's a reason why it doesn't work, because it doesn't. So what does work? There are 3 major schools of marriage counseling. The first is Gottman, by far and away the best school, but the 2 other major schools in the top 3 are called emotion-based therapy and Crucible Therapy. And then, of course, there's Gottman therapy. Now, Gottman we've talked about. We've talked about in depth. We've talked about Gottman in depth. We've talked about really an entire system of interacting with your spouse. A way to be a husband, an in-charge man. So we've talked about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, and how Gottman counsels to avoid those. We talked about the fact that Gottman is an observational paradigm. It's based on looking and watching how successful couples interact. And we've talked about soft startups and being non-judgmental and responding to bids for attention and recognizing bids for attention. All these things are part of the Gottman method. But the other 2 methods of marriage counseling are, well, first of all, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's a different method. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a method for restructuring your cognitive thoughts and your behavior, and it's incorporated in the Gottman method. It was developed in individual counseling, and it's still being used for couples counseling, with, again, the rate of success equal to trephining and drilling holes in the skull. So, what does work? Well, it turns out that there are two therapies that claim to work, at least in some cases. And that's, as I say, emotion-based therapy and crucible therapy. And the interesting thing about them is that they are polar opposites. Let me repeat that. Crucible therapy and emotion-based therapy are the exact opposite. In crucible therapy, a crucible is a melting pot. You melt down the alloys and the metals separate, right? You get steel and gold and silver. The point is you have separate alloys, and they only come together in the crucible, and they only come apart in the crucible. So that's the idea there. But in the bottom line that you need to understand about emotion-based therapy and crucible therapy is that emotion-based therapy is about obtaining fusion. It's about binding the couple together into an emotionally fused relationship. While crucible therapy is about separating the parties and having them build their own individual self that can then come together as whole individual persons. So with emotion-based therapy, we've got a system, let me read it, a system to enhance emotional awareness and connection by restructuring the attachment bond, which of course you created in early childhood and you expanded it and tried to relive it in your marriage in most of your cases. So it's about obtaining fusion, it's about connecting and binding a couple together. And you'd think that would be a good thing. The problem is many couples are emotionally binded, but they're bored. There's no spark. There's no sex. And binding them together even more closely is not going to help. It's going to hurt. In order to bond properly, you have to be a self-actualized individual. And this is what crucible therapy talks about. Crucible therapy talks about increasing differentiation. That is to say, increasing the separateness and the aloneness of the individuals. That's kind of weird when you think about it, because guess what that is, folks? That is developing your frame. That's what the focus of crucible therapy is, to help each party develop their individual frame and then look for ways to overlap those frames. So in crucible therapy terms, dread game is nothing more than differentiation. It's the process, and you look at the steps of dread. You know, the first step and the second step, they're all about separating. They're all about developing that separation between you and your spouse so that you have room to grow between you. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is that Married Red Pill is basically a form of crucible therapy. It is well established and it works. Instead of using differentiation, we use terms like dread game. Developing your differentiation is increasing your dread game. Developing your differentiation is also enhancing your frame. Okay? What we discovered in many coaching sessions I've had with clients and with other coaches is that the difference between emotion-based therapy and dread game, or crucible therapy, is that couples who respond best to emotion-based therapy have an egalitarian relationship, while couples who respond best to crucible therapy have a power imbalance in their relationship. So who are my clients? I use crucible therapy primarily. Who are my clients? They're men. They're men, and why do the men seek out coaching? It's because they want their wives to have sex with them. They want to be desired and wanted. So we have a power imbalance in that relationship. We have a sex-denying wife who has all the power and a husband who has no power. And so the focus of me in coaching, and maybe others, but I focus on men, the focus in my coaching is to empower the client, to give him the tools he needs to be in the crucible and survive and win. So that is my approach, and that's what I do. I work on men. We develop your frame. We develop your differentiation. And then, in some cases, usually with the alpha guys, I have to use emotion-based therapy. I have to work on enhancing the bond and the fusion between the man and his wife. And it depends on what the power dynamic is. And that's really what we look for. So I hope that was helpful. That was an overview of the 3 or 4 major methodologies of marriage counseling. It was a kind of relationship to what we do in Married Red Pill, and an affirmation, I think, that what we're doing is right because it works. So, again, if you need any help about any of these concepts, if you're having trouble in your marriage, if you want more sex in the marriage, if you don't feel like your wife is validating you enough, give me a call, because I can help. We have the tools that can make you succeed and that can help you to win. So take heart, ladies and gentlemen. I will be back next week with another video. I'll be finishing my book, The Passionate Marriage. David Schnarch, who developed Crucible Therapy, and I will probably be giving you a review of Schnarch's latest book on the passionate marriage and how to develop and differentiate, how to build your frame. So thank you very much. Have a great week. I'll see you next time.
I can't do this all on my own. No, I know I'm no Superman. I'm no Superman.
Those bastards are you. They're your sons. They're your brothers. They're your fathers. This whole attack on Kavanaugh, they are concealing it. It's not really an attack on Kavanaugh, folks. It's an attack on all men.
So this is an important time for our country. This is a time when your father, when your husband, when your brother, when your son could do great. Mom, I did great in school. I've worked so hard. Mom, I'm so pleased to tell you I just got a fantastic job with IBM. I just got a fantastic job with General Motors. I'm so proud. Mom, a terrible thing just happened. A person who I've never met said that I did things that were horrible, and they're firing me from my job, Mom. I don't know what to do. Mom, what do I do? What do I do, Mom? That's something to think of. Your son, think of your husband. We all take. If you're not a warrior, you just go home, go to the corner, put your thumb in your mouth and say, Mommy, take me home. You gotta be a warrior.